Hello and welcome. In this lesson, we are going to talk about choosing a trim size for your book. The trim size refers to the width and height of your book. For instance, are you going to choose a trim size that is 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches? Or are you going to choose a trim size that is 5 inches by 8 inches? Let's talk about the trim size and the different options that you have available to you, depending on the publishing platform that you choose. So far, we have introduced two publishing platforms. They are KDP, which stands for Kindle Direct Publishing, and then there's Ingram Spark. We're going to see how different publishing platforms offer different trim sizes, and how do you as an author go about selecting a trim size. In this video, you would also notice that I have a different trim. One of the early decisions you must make is choosing the height and width of your book. So this height and width, as I mentioned, is known as the book's trim size. We've already mentioned that the publishing platform you're working with will offer different trim sizes. For example, 5 by 8 inches, 5.5 by 8.5 inches, 6 by 9 inches, 11 by 8.5 inches. The big question is, which should you choose? There's a 4 by 6, which is a typical mass trade paperback size, 5.5 by 8.5 inches, 6 by 9 inches. One of the things I want to impress on you early is that the publishing platform you're working with, they would have specifications outlined as to the print sizes that are available to you. To the bottom, we have One Cute Story, which is a children's book, 11 by 8.5 inches. Your book has a particular genre, it has a particular category. A good starting point for you might be to compare your book to other books in the same category or the same genre. And you want to choose books by established publishers. Consider the format, paperback versus hardcover. Consider the age of the book. As a self-published writer who has designed my own book covers and formatted my own books, one of the early mistakes I made was never referencing what was available on the bookshelf. I never referenced what was available on the bestseller list. I never built a sense of, this is a crime story, let me investigate what other crime story books look like. What sizes do they choose? We are talking specifically about choosing the width and height of the book. But we could take it a step further than just referencing books on the bookshelf. This is difficult for me to admit, but looking back, I realized that I should have consulted existing books, not just in terms of trim size, but in terms of the book covers, how they were designed given the categories. I know we're talking about trim sizes, but I want to urge you as a writer who is about to self-publish your book to really find inspiration from your bookshelf. Similar books that are on bestseller list, because over time, readers, librarians, other professionals, they have been sort of trained to think about how a particular book looks. Consider a book of horror versus a romantic comedy. Consider a children's book. Maybe you yourself make certain associations based on the size of a book. Follow the pack. Establish the trim sizes major publishers are using for books in your category. We'll get to that in a bit when we visit the New York Times bestseller list and see what's trending for books in a particular category. So here we have 4 different examples. This information is taken from Ingram Spark's specifications when it comes to trim sizes. Novels and poetry books, trim size 6 by 9, and they give some details as to the page count. The publishing platform you work with will define a minimum and maximum page count for the trim size you are interested in. For children's and cookbooks, we have a trim size of 8.5 by 8.5 inches, binding type, hardback, laminate cover, gloss, interior color, standard color versus the black and white that we saw in the novel earlier on. And the minimum page count here is 25. When I published my first book, 90 Days of Violence, this is a 5.5 by 8.5 inches. And it's very subtle, perhaps, to some people, but I much rather, for my novels, a 5 by 8 inch book. Let your personal taste guide you as well. I already mentioned that each publishing platform has clearly defined specifications regarding trim sizes and the minimum and maximum number of pages. Here's the major concern for me. Trim size impacts the page count and ultimately the cost of printing your book. For instance, a 7 by 10 book has less pages than a book that is 5 by 8 inches. But it's up to you in terms of, do you want a thinner or a thicker book? One of the good things with self-publishing is that you have creative control over how your book looks. As I mentioned, each publishing platform will define trim sizes for their books. So if I jump into Ingram Spark's documentation that they have, it's available online or as PDF documents that you could download. I jump into the popular trim sizes that they have, and I scroll down. If I was to just zoom in here a bit, based on Ingram Spark's specifications, a book that is 4 by 6 inches perfect bound, using a particular type of paper, let's say in this instance white, the minimum number of pages it could have is 18 pages, a maximum of 1200 pages. So there are different rules. If I jump across to 5 by 8, we will see that a 5 by 8 perfect bound using white pages accommodates a minimum of 18 and a maximum of 1200 pages. You must consult your publishing platform's documentation to see the trim sizes that are available, bearing in mind that the trim size affects the page count. And if your plan is to order books from your publishing platform and ship it to yourself in quantity so that you will be able to resell it, you want to consider the number of pages, because the ultimate cost of your book is going to be determined by the number of pages it contains. Similarly, Kindle Direct Publishing will outline the available trim sizes to the author. When it comes to choosing a trim size for your book, one of the things you can do is find inspiration from books that are currently on bestseller list. Let's open our preferred browser and jump across to the New York Times bestseller list. In this example, we are going to assume that you, the author, you're working on a book of fantasy. So we are on the New York Times bestseller page. We have different categories for fiction, non-fiction. Let's work with fiction, jumping to the section on paperback trade fiction. Remember, we focused on the trim size. Number 1 on the list is The Teacher. Bride is number 2 on the list. Let's go with this book. I'll click buy, jump across to Amazon.com, and my intention is to find out the formats that are available. The book is available on Kindle. It's available as an audiobook. There's a hardcover, and there's a paperback. We are interested in the paperback. Let's find out the dimensions that are available. The book is 416 pages, and the format is 5.5 by 8.5, more or less. How is this information helpful? The self-published writer could use this information to calculate how much the book would cost them if they were to print it. Let's consider the online printing platform Ingram Spark. Remember these details. 416 pages at 5.5 by 8.5 inches. That is the trim size of the book and the number of pages. As a self-published writer, I could use this information to determine the printing cost of my book. So I'm going to jump across to Ingram Spark. They have a tool called a printing calculator. Let's go to Google, and I'm going to search for Ingram Spark printing calculator. Because chances are you want to order copies of your book, ship it to yourself so that you could sell it. On Ingram Spark, I'll open the print and ship calculator. Let's assume you are living in the United States. You could choose the United States. Maybe you are living in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe you are living in Jamaica. Let's assume you're living in Florida in the United States. And we want to use this print and shipping calculator to determine how much it would cost you. Sticking with the example of a book that is 5.5 by 8.5 inches, let's just verify the dimensions. The dimensions is 5.48 by 8.26, 5.48 by 8.26. On Ingram Spark, the closest option they have is 5.5 by 8.25. Let's select that option. We're going to choose a black and white interior, binding type, paperback perfect bound, cover gloss. The page count is 416. I'm shipping to the United States, Florida, 33126. Printing location, the US. And I'm a self-published writer, just getting started. So I'm going to start with 100 books and I'll calculate the cost. If I selected an economy service, standard ground shipping, the entire cost of this project would be $813 US to print 100 books at 5.5 by 8.25 inches, 416 pages, for a total of $813.71. That's how you use the trim size and the page count to determine the cost of printing your book as a self-published author. We've already established that different publishing platforms have different trim sizes available. So far, we've spoken about Ingram Spark and the available trim sizes that they have. Another option that the self-published writer has is to use KDP or Kindle Direct Publishing as a publishing platform. Let's assume that you've considered the options that are available to you and you've decided to use Kindle Direct Publishing. Then you have a responsibility to visit their website, visit their documentation, and see the available trim sizes that they offer. To do this, you would open your preferred browser, jump to your preferred search engine, and I'm going to search for Kindle Direct Publishing trim sizes. The very first option, set trim size, bleed, and margins. We'll talk about bleed in a later lesson. And scrolling through this document, I go to the trim size. It says trim size specifications, width by height, with minimum and maximum page counts. This is for kdpamazon.com. And then there are different trim sizes for kdp.amazon.co.jp. Let's work with kdp.amazon.com. If I expand these options, I would see the different trim sizes that are available to me, along with the minimum and maximum page count based on the type of paper. In this instance, white paper, there's cream paper, then there's standard color and white paper, and then premium color ink and white paper, and the different trim sizes. In our example, where we have a book that is 47 pages long, I mentioned that the preferred trim size I have settled on over the years is 5 by 8 inches. I would be able to use this trim size because my book is 47 pages, which puts me in the range of 24 to 828 pages. Let's say you were doing a children's book that is 7 by 10 inches with a color interior and a color cover. To see if that option is available to you, let's jump to large trim size, 7 by 10 inches. I am looking for standard color ink and white paper. This option is not currently available. Then there's premium color ink and white paper. The page range, however, must be a minimum of 75 pages. So if your children's book only had 25 pages, you wouldn't qualify for this particular trim size. You would have to scroll to one of the options that place you within that range. It's crucial that once you have selected an online publishing platform, that you become intimately familiar with the trim sizes that they have available, the minimum and maximum page count, and how the trim size you have selected influences the printing cost of your book.